The HOA built a $1 million mall on what they thought was public land, only to find out I owned every last inch. How far would you let them go before pulling the rug out from under them? Welcome to the channel. If you love stories where power-hungry HOAs get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. The crunch of gravel under my tires should have felt like coming home. Instead, it sounded wrong. Mechanical. Like the land itself was trying to warn me. I crested the ridge where the old oak used to stand and froze. Where golden wheat fields once swayed with the wind, now stood a steel skeleton rising from the earth. Bulldozers roamed like insects. Excavators churned up soil. Temporary fencing stretched across the property, wrapped in glossy banners that read, Willow Point Plaza, a Colorado Mingu development. My truck rolled to a stop on instinct. I just sat there, heart pounding, mouth dry, staring at the disaster unfolding on my land. It didn't feel real. Like I'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. That soil, my soil, was the same my grandfather and I had bled into each spring. The land that had been in our family since 1903. Gone. Torn apart. I hadn't been gone long, 3 maybe 4 months. A short-term consulting gig out of state. Just trying to bring in a little more before retirement. But while I was gone, my legacy had been bulldozed by strangers. I parked near the edge of the site and walked down the slope, gravel biting into my boots. A foreman in a reflective vest looked up from his clipboard. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said slowly, voice tightening. "You're standing on my land." He blinked, gave me a once-over. "You the owner of parcel 1149? "That's right," I said. "The one with the old well and the blue barn. Or at least it used to have them." His brow furrowed. He suddenly looked less confident. "We were told the land belonged to the Willow Crest HOA. Permits are signed. Contracts executed. Development's been in planning for 2 years." I felt my blood chill. "The HOA doesn't own this land," I snapped. "I do. I never sold it. I never gave permission for anything. This is private property." He swallowed hard. "You'll have to talk to the board. We just follow the paperwork." He pointed to a cluster of mobile offices across the lot, luxury trailers with tinted windows, power hookups, and flags flapping above them. I didn't think. I moved. Up the steps. Through the front door. A receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help?" "I need to speak to whoever's in charge. Now." She knocked on a nearby door labeled Project Director/HOA Dev Committee. It creaked open. And there she was. Karen Monroe. Queen of the HOA. Hair perfect. Blazer too crisp for anything resembling actual work. That smug little smile she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. Well, she said, eyes raking over me. "You're back early. What the hell is going on here?" I growled, stepping into her office without waiting for an invitation. "You're building a goddamn shopping mall on my land." Karen didn't flinch. "Actually," she said, sliding a folder across her desk, "this parcel was redesignated for community use in the latest zoning update. Your absence created uncertainty in ownership. The board voted. The county approved the permits. Everything is signed, sealed, and moving forward." I snatched the documents and flipped through them. Permits. County stamps. An HOA resolution. But none of them had my name on them. "I never sold this land," I hissed. "And I never approved a damn thing." Karen tilted her head, voice still syrupy sweet. "It's possible the title records weren't updated. You know how old properties are, maybe something got lost in the shuffle. Maybe your grandfather forgot to file a document. These things happen." My vision blurred with rage. "You forged something," I muttered. "Or you bullied someone." Karen's smile didn't falter. "If you feel something's wrong," she said, "you're welcome to file a formal grievance. But I'd advise against making waves. This project is good for the neighborhood. It's progress. I left before I did something I'd regret. That night I tore through every drawer in my house. Deeds, tax records, letters from the county. My grandfather had saved everything. And so had I. There it was. The original land grant. The notarized deed in my name. Decades of tax records. No HOA jurisdiction. No zoning exception. No sale. I wasn't just the legal owner. I was the only owner. The next morning, I drove straight to the county recorder's office. Mike, an old-timer at the desk, blinked when I dropped the folder on the counter. "This is the original survey," he murmured. "Where'd you get this?" "It's mine," I said. "Always has been." He typed. "Search. Cross-referenced." "That's odd," he said. "The zoning map was updated last year. But it's based on a digitized plat file. Not the original. And I don't see a recorded sale or transfer." "Because there wasn't one," I said flatly. "So how the hell did they get permission to build?" He scratched his head. "Looks like the HOA submitted a development petition. Claimed the land was abandoned agriculture, unmaintained and suitable for repurposing. It had community support, so it got fast-tracked." "That's a lie," I snapped. "I've got records, time-stamped logs, crop rotations, photos, tax payments, everything." Mike looked genuinely unsettled now. "If you can prove you never relinquished ownership," he said, "and that it wasn't legally annexed, then they're building illegally." He paused. "But you'll need to prove they never had jurisdiction in the first place." "Oh," I said, taking the certified copy of my deed. "I'll prove it." I wasn't going to sue. Not yet. But the rug was about to be pulled. And when it happened, I'd make sure everyone watching felt the impact first. I had to understand the full scope of what they'd done. So I documented everything. Drone footage, photographs, environmental damage, boundary encroachments. Karen was out there in a hard hat, smiling for the local news, acting like she was queen of the county, never realizing the ground beneath her feet didn't legally belong to her. Not even close. I started talking to neighbors. Not the loud ones. The quiet ones. The ones who never spoke at meetings but noticed everything. Turns out, I wasn't the only one blindsided. An old man down the road told me the HOA had been poking around for months, asking about unused parcels and community expansion. Another neighbor admitted she'd signed a petition under pressure. "They told me it was for a dog park," she whispered. "I didn't know it was about your farm." I gave her a tight smile. "It's okay," I said. "They just built a multi-million-dollar monument to their own stupidity. And soon I'm going to own every inch of it." Because the more I dug, the more obvious it became. The HOA had no rights. They didn't check the records. They didn't do their homework. They assumed I was gone, that no one would notice. They forgot that some land comes with teeth. And they just walked straight into the lion's mouth. I could have stopped them. I had the documents, the proof. I could have walked into the county office and filed for an injunction, shut the whole thing down with a single stamp. But I didn't. Because I remembered something my grandfather once told me. "Let 'em build their castle on your dirt, son. Because the deed always wins." That day I wasn't holding papers. I was holding a loaded weapon. And the longer I waited, the more powerful it became. The next morning, I drove 3 towns over to meet an old friend, Marcus Bennett, a real estate attorney I'd known since college. I laid everything out on his kitchen table: deeds, aerial photos, certified tax records, the works. He flipped through them slowly, sipping his coffee, until his eyes landed on a faded yellow document folded in thirds. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Back of a drawer in my grandfather's desk," I said. "Why?" He leaned in. "Because this isn't just a deed. It's a protective covenant. Filed in 1982. Notarized and reaffirmed when your dad took over in 96. He pointed to a clause barely legible in the faded type. "The subject parcel shall remain exempt from all municipal annexation, zoning reassignment and third-party governance by any entity not explicitly listed in this deed, including but not limited to homeowners associations, boards, or improvement committees. I stared at him. You're saying they can't touch me? Marcus nodded. Not only did they not have the right to build on your land, they never had jurisdiction in the first place. You're grandfathered. Ironclad. I let out a breathless laugh. But Marcus wasn't done. He flipped to the last page and pointed again. This is where it gets really spicy, he said. It was a clause I'd never noticed, faint, buried near the bottom. Any structure erected upon the parcel without written consent of the deed holder shall, upon completion, be considered the sole property of said deed holder, regardless of financing, labor source, or intended use. I looked at him, stunned. Wait, what? Marcus grinned. You heard me. If they finish that mall, it's yours. All of it. Every bolt, every brick. Built on your land? Then it legally belongs to you. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the wind rustle the blinds. Marcus leaned back. You realize what this means, right? If you let them finish, they'll hand you a fully developed, commercial retail center. Paid for with someone else's money. I exhaled slowly. So all I have to do is nothing. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Sit back. Stay quiet. Let them think they've won. And that's exactly what I did. From that moment on, I became the most cooperative landowner in the county. I stopped objecting. Stopped attending meetings. Stopped asking questions. At the next HOA gathering, I even stood up and said, if it's good for the community, I won't stand in the way. Karen Monroe beamed like she'd just won a war. The room applauded. Some whispered, finally. He's come around. I played my role well. Never argued. Never resisted. Just smiled, nodded, and watched them pour millions into land that legally belonged to me. I documented everything. Drone footage, trail cams, delivery logs, construction receipts, blueprints left behind by lazy contractors. Steel beams went up. HVAC systems rolled in. Electrical infrastructure buried itself into my soil like roots into a grave. Each day they worked, they buried themselves deeper into my trap. By month 2, the concrete shell was complete. Willow Point Plaza banners hung proudly from the scaffolding. Karen gave interviews, beaming under that hard hat, gushing about a new era of prosperity. I clipped every quote. Saved every article. They had no idea they were sinking. One afternoon I dropped off donuts at the site. Figured you guys could use a treat, I told the workers. They waved, thanked me. You live around here? One asked. Used to farm this land, I said. Still kinda do. The foreman laughed. At least you're not like that one guy calling the county every week, keeps saying the permits are wrong. That right, I said. Someone's trying to interfere? He shrugged. HOA says not to worry. They've got it handled. I smiled. Tell Karen I'm rooting for her. That night I took more photos. The roof was finished. Power lines in. Tenants named in press releases. Boutique gyms, high-end coffee shops, a spa. I printed the photos, added them to a binder labeled Evidence of Transfer, Structure Complete. I called Marcus. They just put the sign up, I said. Grand opening. This Saturday. Ribbon cutting. Mayor's attending. You ready? He asked. Let them have their moment, I said. Let them cut the ribbon. Let her enjoy the spotlight. Then I smiled. Because the look on her face afterward? That's going to be priceless. For the next 6 weeks I played the part. HOA emails went unanswered. Fees paid on time. I waved to Karen when I saw her walking her dog. Looks like it's all coming together, I'd say. She'd beam and nod. We're building something that'll last for decades, she'd reply. And I'd think, oh, it'll last. As a monument to your arrogance. They weren't building a mall. They were building my mall. They just didn't know it yet. Billboards. Glass facades. A parking lot that swallowed the horizon. They named it Willow Point Plaza, but I called it something else. Exhibit A. I watched from the tree line, half in shadow, as Karen Monroe and her entourage strutted across my land like it was Versailles. Hard hats, designer boots, posing for cameras like they just cured cancer. The construction fences were plastered with glossy renderings, cafes, rooftop yoga, luxury boutiques. Karen even gave interviews to the local press, praising the HOA's vision for sustainable growth, and claiming this mall would revitalize the county and elevate property values for everyone. I clipped every article, archived every press release, screenshotted every headline that called it a community-funded, member-backed initiative. They were documenting their own downfall. In 4K. And me? I was right there, third row at every HOA meeting. Silent. Unbothered. Legal pad in hand, pen never moving. Just a quiet former farmer playing the part of the beaten man. Karen loved it. She'd nod at me across the room, smirking like she was patting a child on the head. Some people just don't know when to let go, she once said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, after I raised a mild concern about construction noise. Everyone laughed. I didn't, but I recorded it. Because every time Karen opened her mouth, she wrapped another gift for my case file. Behind the curtain of champagne toasts and PR stunts, the HOA was hemorrhaging money. And they didn't care. I found the ledger copies by accident, left behind on a copier tray at the temporary HOA office when I stopped by to pick up a welcome back packet they insisted I needed. I scanned them before anyone noticed. What I saw made my jaw lock. $212,000 labeled pre-construction planning. $87,000 in landscaping, billed to the HOA's general maintenance fund. $140,000 for community advertising, aka their flashy billboard campaign. They were using resident dues to fund a multi-million-dollar project on land they didn't even own. It wasn't just fraud, it was fraud wearing a name tag. And no one questioned it. Because Karen had weaponized charm, power, and fear. Anyone who pushed back, fought, cited, erased. That's what happened to George and Linda Bishop. Nice couple. Lived 2 doors down from the construction site. George raised a zoning concern at a meeting, said the site was disrupting migratory birds, increasing noise pollution. 2 days later, a violation notice arrived. Their garage door style no longer met updated architectural standards. That garage had stood untouched since 1984. A week after that, $300 fine for non-compliant lawn edging. Then came the hammer. Failure to resolve outstanding violations will result in legal review and potential eviction under Covenant Clause 9.7. They didn't have the money. Or the energy. Within a month, their house was empty. Porch swing still swaying in the breeze like it was waiting for someone who wouldn't come back. I took pictures of every notice. Saved every email Linda forwarded me. She cried when they left. I told her it would be okay. And I meant it. Because the more Karen bullied this neighborhood, the more I let her believe she'd won. Every shovel of dirt she turned was another nail in her legal coffin. I watched as contractors rerouted stormwater without permits, tore through protected tree roots, dumped gravel into wetlands and flattened soil protected by federal law. I filed 3 environmental complaints, anonymously. Each one backed with GPS coordinates and time-stamped photos. But I didn't file them under my name. Not yet. Because I needed them to build more. Every violation stacked up like bricks, adding weight to the fall. Karen was too drunk on her own success to see it coming. She held town halls in the unfinished food court, gave tours to investors while drywall dust clung to her blazer like confetti. This project will triple our home values, she beamed, even as half the neighborhood fell behind on dues because she'd quietly raised the rates to cover overages. I stood in the back sipping watered-down punch, nodding along, photographing exposed wires and blocked fire exits. She thought no one was paying attention. So I let her bask. Let her believe. Let her dig deeper. One of my favorite moments? The Community Appreciation Barbecue. Karen handed out tote bags with the mall logo and flyers that read "Built for Us by Us." I nearly choked on my pulled pork. In front of two realtors and the county treasurer, I asked, "Hey Karen, did you ever find the original title transfer for this parcel? Just curious." Her smile froze. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a chuckle that didn't reach her eyes. "It's all been handled." "Cool," I said, nodding. "Would love to see it sometime. You know, family history and all." She excused herself in under 10 seconds. That night, her assistant was snooping around my mailbox. I didn't confront him. Just filmed it through a night vision lens and added it to my trespassing folder. That folder was getting heavy. The receipts folder was even heavier. Turns out, Karen's assistant used an unsecured cloud folder for internal budget drafts. One Google search of his full name and 3 hours later, I had it all. The budget breakdown. Donor list. The discretionary fund that paid for Karen's leased BMW, filed as a security patrol vehicle. $11,000 in consulting fees to a firm owned by her brother. I wasn't even mad. Honestly, I was impressed. She turned HOA corruption into an art form. But every dollar she misappropriated? What? Every unauthorized brick laid? What? Every unpermitted pipe and illegal backroom deal? Still mine. She was building my empire with stolen materials. And didn't even know it. By week 12, Willow Point Plaza had working power, a food court, and tenants prepping for soft openings. The grand ribbon cutting was scheduled. Karen's face was printed on the flyer next to the mayor's. "A new era begins," it read. I stuck it on the fridge with a pig-shaped magnet and circled the date in red. Then I started dressing different. Showing up to meetings in my grandfather's boots and the button-up he wore the day he signed his last land deal. Karen noticed. Of course she did. She spoke louder. Smiled harder. Carried herself like royalty. "We've turned a forgotten piece of land into a beacon of hope," she declared during the vote too. Karen Monroe raised her glass at the podium, practically glowing under the fluorescent lights. "We're raising HOA fees another 7%, she declared. This will go down in history." She wasn't wrong. It would. Just not the way she thought. I nodded. I clapped. I even leaned over after her speech and whispered, "Incredible work, Karen. Truly inspiring." She beamed. Drunk on praise. She had no idea she was about to choke on it. All I had to do now was wait. Let them finish the interior. Let them stock the shelves, plug in the neon, and hang that now open banner across the entrance. Because when they finally stepped back to admire what they'd built, I'd be standing right there. And I wouldn't be clapping. The room was already half full when I walked in. Rows of plastic chairs held HOA board members, a few nosy residents, and 3 reporters with notebooks and camera bags. Karen stood near the front, all sharp lines and calculated posture, laughing too loudly at something the county zoning official said. She glanced up and saw me. Her smile tightened. But she didn't break character. "Didn't think we'd see you here tonight," she called sweetly. "We assumed you'd finally made peace with the project." I smiled as I removed my jacket and draped it over the chair in the front row. "Oh, I've made peace with a lot of things." She raised a brow. I turned to the crowd, cleared my throat, and said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know this meeting was called on short notice, but given the scale of recent development, I think we can all agree, a community safety review is long overdue." A few murmurs. Nods. Confusion. Karen frowned. "I thought this was a budget discussion." "It was going to be," I said, "until I found something. Actually, several somethings." Behind me the projector flickered on. Slide 1, a drone shot of Willow Point Plaza. Sleek, massive, absurdly confident, centered on the exact coordinates of the land my family had owned since 1903. "This is the completed structure," I said, flipping through crystal-clear images. "The HVAC installs. The electrical trenches. The storm drains. All of it, built without the consent of the deed holder. Karen scoffed. We've been over this. The parcel was zoned for development and... Zoned, I interrupted, doesn't mean transferred. Click. Slide 2, the scanned certified deed. Signed in 1982 by my grandfather. Reaffirmed by my father in 1996. Then again by me in 2009. Highlighted in red. Parcel 1149 shall remain exempt from HOA governance, municipal annexation, and zoning transfer unless explicitly executed by the current deed holder, with notarized approval. I let the silence settle. Karen blinked, then said too quickly. That clause has no bearing on current development approvals. We filed everything properly. You filed incomplete paperwork, I replied. And you failed to verify ownership. I flipped to the next slide. Statute violations. Forgery. Unlawful construction. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges for that alone. Dead silence. Only the scribbling of reporters' pens. Now, I continued, let's move on to something more expensive. I pulled a slim envelope from my satchel and laid it on the lectern. Inside is a notarized legal notice, filed with the county records office this morning. I opened it slowly, unfolded it, and read aloud. As of this date, legal ownership of all standing commercial structures within parcel 1149, including but not limited to buildings, utilities, signage, and infrastructural improvements, is hereby transferred to the sole registered landowner under Reversionary Clause 9C, as filed in 1982 and reaffirmed in 1996 and 2009. Ownership is exclusive and binding, regardless of third-party financing, labor, or intent. The zoning inspector looked up, stunned. Wait, you mean? Yes, I said. Everything they built, now legally belongs to me. Every brick, every bolt, every buried cable. All $12 million of it. The room erupted. A dozen people spoke at once, some in disbelief, others in awe. Karen didn't move. She stared straight ahead like she'd just been shot in the stomach. Click. Final slide. An offer letter from a national real estate investment trust. We are prepared to offer $18.6 million for full rights and access to Willow Point Plaza, contingent upon proof of ownership and clean title. I held it up for the room to see. So not only do I own it, someone already wants to buy it. At a profit. Karen finally found her voice. This is a trick. You can't just steal back a project we spent months. No, I said, smiling. You stole the land. I just let you spend a fortune developing something you never had the right to touch. Board members began whispering. One stood up and left. By the way, I added, turning to the zoning official, you might want to prepare for some heat. Because someone in your office approved permits without verifying land title. That's going to be a fun phone call tomorrow. He paled. You can't do this, Karen gasped. I already did. And then I twisted the knife. And because you used HOA funds without proper disclosure, every homeowner in this neighborhood technically invested in my mall. I turned to the room. So thank you all sincerely for your contributions. I'll be putting them to very good use. Gasp. Nervous laughter. One woman actually clapped before catching herself. Karen was spiraling. We'll fight this, we'll sue. We'll drag this out in court. I pulled out one last envelope, smaller, heavier. That's cute, I said. But the title office disagrees. So does my buyer. And if you want a court fight, you'll be paying for it personally. Why? Because you're already under investigation for misusing HOA funds. I stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. That missing budget ledger? I found it. And I forwarded it to the state attorney's office last week. Karen's hands shook. Her mouth opened. No words came. I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear. You should have left my land alone. Then I turned to the crowd, raised my final document high. This isn't a protest. This is a transfer of power. The zoning official stood and confirmed it. The reporter's cameras clicked like a thunderstorm. And Karen? She sat frozen, staring at the floor while the empire she'd built on stolen dirt collapsed beneath her, just like the house of cards it always was. I let her think she won. Let her celebrate. Let her raise the fees and take her victory lap. And now, I owned it all. With her money, her votes, her name on every receipt. It was the most satisfying real estate deal of my life. And I hadn't paid a single cent. It started with whispers, driveway gossip and raised eyebrows over coffee. But by the end of the week it was an earthquake. Karen Monroe's empire had cracked, then crumbled, buried by its own arrogance. The story broke locally first. Mall built on private land, HOA faces legal bombshell. Then it spread statewide. By Monday, a state investigator was on site, reviewing the files I'd so generously leaked to the press. Board members who once stood beside Karen at ribbon cuttings? Now they wouldn't even return her calls. No one returned her calls. They were too busy dialing their lawyers. A special emergency meeting was called, this time without Karen Monroe. Facing a storm of accusations, financial mismanagement, embezzlement, reckless governance, the board had no choice. They voted unanimously to remove her as HOA president. Some members tried to squirm away, claimed they were misled, that they had no idea who truly owned the land. But I had the receipts, emails, timestamps, minutes from closed-door meetings they thought were private. Now the state attorney's office had them too. They fell one by one like dominoes. Karen's closest allies resigned, some to avoid scrutiny, others because the heat got too real. I watched it all unfold from my porch, cold drink in hand. Just like my grandfather used to sit and watch the sun dip behind those wheat fields. Only now, those fields had become something more than crops. They were leverage. They were legacy. They were my fortress. Within days, a class action lawsuit began to form. Angry residents, many of whom never wanted the mall to begin with, realized they'd spent thousands in HOA dues financing a project that now belonged entirely to me. They paid for Karen's monument to herself, and watched me walk away with it. It wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal. Some demanded refunds. Others demanded resignations. A few demanded jail time. I stayed silent. I didn't need to gloat. The facts did it for me. Meanwhile, my phone rang nonstop. The buyer I'd spoken with before? Still interested and now eager. No liens. No partners. No red tape. Just clean ownership, shovel ready. We finalized the deal in under a week. $18.6 million wired directly into my account. I walked into the county recorder's office with transfer papers in one hand, and walked out a multimillionaire. And I still hadn't spent a single cent. The final irony? The HOA had already sunk more than $3.5 million before construction even broke ground. Legal fees, consultants, landscaping, promotional events. Gone. Their accounts drained. Their reputation shattered. And the mall? It would still operate, just under new management. The new owners, a retail investment firm, were kind enough to rename it in my honor. Miller Commons. My grandfather would have laughed himself hoarse. I had the new sign installed right above the main entrance, where Karen's precious Willow Point Plaza letters once stood. I didn't invite her to the unveiling. I didn't need to. She saw it anyway. I watched her car crawl past the entrance that morning. She didn't stop, didn't wave, just kept driving, past her greatest failure, one she could never undo. Her house, the old pride of the HOA, started to rot. Buyers backed out. Property values dipped. And without Karen pulling the strings, her little kingdom fell into disrepair. She tried to hang on, painted the trim, tamed the lawn. But scandal has a stench money can't scrub. Eventually, a for sale sign appeared out front. A few weeks later I saw the moving truck. Karen stood on the curb in sunglasses, trying not to be recognized. Didn't look at me when I waved. That was fine. I didn't need a goodbye. Watching her climb into the passenger seat of a beat-up sedan, her leased BMW repossessed months ago, was enough. Across the street, new board members were being elected. People with real integrity. Or at least enough fear not to follow in her footsteps. The HOA's power shrank back to what it should have been all along. Lawn disputes. Fence approvals. Summer potlucks. No more empires. No more malls. As for my land, it's now permanently off limits. I filed a declaration of exemption backed by historical records, court recognition, and a generous donation to the local Historical Preservation Society. I even put up a little fence. More symbolic than anything. No trespassing. No surveying. No development. Not unless I say so. And believe me, I won't. Funny thing is, I didn't need the money. Sure, it's nice to sit on a few million. I bought a new truck. Fixed up the old farmhouse. But that was never the point. This wasn't about getting rich. It was about proving something. A truth my grandfather drilled into me before I could even walk. Land isn't just dirt, boy. It's roots. It's memory. It's legacy. And if someone tries to take it, you don't just stop them. You make them wish they'd never tried. And that's exactly what I did. Karen tried to build a kingdom on my soil. She poured concrete over my family story and thought she'd buried me. But all she did was plant the seed of her own downfall. Now, I sit on the porch most mornings, sipping my coffee as contractors polish the mall's glass windows down below. I still call it mine. Even though I sold it, doesn't matter. The story belongs to me. The land always did. And when people ask me how I pulled it off, I just smile and say, they built me a mall. I let them. Then I sold it. And I watched. Then I wait for the silence. That moment when they realize what it really means. I didn't just beat the HOA. I used them. I turned their greed into gold. Their arrogance into leverage. Their signatures into a contract they never read. That old farmland they thought was just empty space? It became the most powerful legal trap in the county. And they walked right into it. Eyes wide. Wallets open. Thinking they were the ones in control. But I was always in the driver's seat. All I had to do was wait. And now, I'm retired. Comfortable. Free. The HOA never bothers me anymore. They know better. Everyone does. Karen's name? It's never mentioned. Her legacy is a whisper, a warning. And me? I'm the guy who turned a field into a fortune. Without ever lifting a shovel. Just sat still. And let them build my future. Brick by stolen brick.